Questions? I'm going to start over here.
Senator Wahls, you talked about, Senator Warren, you talked about needing 51 votes. One of the things that Zach has been talking about is needing to get rid of the filibuster, so 51 votes. Is that something you're in support of?
Oh, I've been in support of that for a very long time. But let me underscore, whether we get rid of the filibuster or not, reversing the health care cuts that will cost the lives of people right here in Iowa can be done with 51 votes. That one goes through the money in. The Republicans passed the bill to take away health care from tens of thousands of people here in Iowa, and they did it with 51 votes, no one but Republicans. If we can have a Democratic majority, we can reverse those cuts before more people in Iowa die and more rural hospitals close.
Senator Warren. It's like we're just work around. No, you're totally fine. You're totally fine.
I will wait my turn.
No, it's all good.
Just excited.
Okay.
Yeah, you heard from a lot of folks about the impacts we're already seeing here in Iowa from some of the cuts to Medicaid. In addition to reversing that, what sort of things do you think need to be done to support rural hospitals?
Well, I'm sorry.
No. Well, so just very quickly. So in our plan, we talk about the need to create a public option, which is something that allows people to buy into Medicare. That's in addition to lowering the Medicare enrollment age to 55 and expanding Medicare coverage. We also have a part of our plan that talks about some new ideas around trying to give rural providers access to facilities, invest in long-term partnerships that would allow young providers to start a practice in a rural community. We have seen a lot of small towns and rural areas have storefronts shutter. There's space available, but we need the right investment from the federal government, which is something that we've talked about, and I think is a relatively novel idea here in our state, but something that we've heard directly from providers across Iowa, that if they had the opportunity to stay local, to practice with the right facility, that they would be happy to do that. We just need to give them a little bit more encouragement to do it. And that's what our plan calls for.
Yeah. Can I just add, it's a really thoughtful plan that Zach has put together to help make healthcare work better in all of Iowa, in rural Iowa, in urban Iowa. But I want to underscore that the Republican cuts to healthcare have only just started, and that what people are already feeling, the pinch, the people who've lost their healthcare access, the people who are already seeing their hospitals close or their providers go away or the long wait lines, all of that is just on the front end. The Republicans very cynically said the real punch to families is going to occur in 2027. So they've already set it up, they've already passed the laws. It is going to make it so much harder for the people of Iowa. So I think of this as a moment where Iowa really stands at the pivot point in history. If Iowa goes along with Republican control in Congress, then these cuts are going to keep rolling, and it literally will cost not just a handful of lives, but many, many lives here in Iowa. But Iowa stands in the perfect position to say, we don't want these cuts, we're going to block the cuts that are coming, and we're going to invest in how to make healthcare more accessible, more affordable, for everyone in Iowa. And then just a tiny little footnote, and that also applies to research on cancer. Republicans have cut it, they've got more cuts coming. We have the chance to reverse that, to put the money in, and to say lives matter more than tax cuts for a handful of billionaires. Iowa has a chance to make that happen with Zach Wahls.
And I just really want to underscore, Robin, the rural component of this. We talked a little bit in the roundtable discussion about what we heard in Red Oak. We've heard the same thing in Denison. We've heard the same thing in Marshalltown. And as a candidate who has actually represented small town in rural Iowa and Cedar County, which was in my district for my first 4 years, is one of a handful of counties across the state that does not have a rural hospital at all. And so you hear that directly from people, that the need to have that access, and our plan would do exactly that. Skylar?
One of the things we heard today specifically was the low wages compared to other states. Do you have a plan or any policy that you would like to see to make sure Iowa has competitive wages and to, keep people here in Iowa?
Well, that's part of why we're so excited to be here at the Teamsters Local 90 Hall. We know that when nurses are able to negotiate collectively to secure a fair contract better wages, better benefits, better workplace conditions. I mean, we heard today concrete examples of how a lot of these institutions are putting profit over patient safety, and that's simply unacceptable. And so I think that making sure that we have the ability to pass the PRO Act, which I will be a proud day one co-sponsor of, making sure that we actually have an NLRB that is functional and not engaging in these delays. We literally just saw a bunch of fist bumps over there, so I appreciate that. I think those are some of the concrete things that will help do that. But again, making sure that we reverse these cuts, as Senator Warren has been talking about, I think is probably going to go a very long ways as well.
But I really want to underscore where Zach is on this. The importance of the unions for our nurses. When our nurses unionize, when our nurses are out making the case, it's not for themselves. They're doing it on behalf of their patients. They're doing it on behalf of patient care that works. Nurses say they're willing to work hard. Dang, they do work hard. But what they don't want to do is work hard and still watch their patients die because there just aren't enough nurses there to do the care that needs to be done. Unionization for nurses is about letting nurses do their jobs and giving them the power to make that happen. That's why it is so important that the nurses union be recognized, that their employers sit down, negotiate a contract with them, and deliver the kind of health services that people in Iowa deserve.
Amanda.
Over the last several election cycles, Democrats have lost ground with rural and working class voters.
Yeah.
Obviously, Senator, you're here supporting, Senator Wahls and his campaign. But I'm just wondering, today you got a chance to talk directly to, Iowans, people in, rural America. Obviously, we're in Des Moines, but a rural state. How do you take that back to the Senate, and what's the impact of having Democrats come to places like Iowa and try to reconnect with voters here?
Yeah. The best way to take that back to Washington is to take Zach Wahls back to Washington. No, it's someone who will really make the case, who will fight on behalf of health care for people here in Iowa, who will fight on behalf of ending a war halfway around the world so that the price of gasoline comes down here in Iowa. Someone who has the courage just to stand up to an administration that is breaking its promises, to an administration that is putting a handful of billionaires ahead of the people of Iowa. And look, I'll take it back. I made a lot of notes. I'll go back and talk with my colleagues. But when we make real change, it's when you have a fighter like Zach Wahls, who's walked those streets, who's been in those emergency rooms, who's been in the union meetings, who's been a part of those fights since he was a little boy. That's the kind of person who comes to Washington and makes a real difference. Instead of hushing up like way too many Republicans have done, Zach Wahls is the kind of guy who will get out there and speak up on behalf of the people whose voices never get heard in Washington.
And Amanda, I just want to say, I have had the opportunity to represent small town, rural communities. My mom grew up in Clayton County, spent a lot of my childhood visiting Elkader and the Driftless area, which is a beautiful part of our state. My mom, Jackie, is a union nurse, and growing up, we had a lot of conversations around our own kitchen table about what difference that made for our family. And what I would tell you is watching the attacks of this administration on the ability of union nurses, both in this state and across the country, to do their jobs, to organize, to bargain, is absolutely unacceptable, and it has to stop. We also have had too many national Democratic leaders who have written off rural and small town America, who have said that the votes of blue collar voters don't matter as much as the votes of other people. I'm proud to have the support of someone who does not believe that that is the case, and that in fact the vote of every single Iowan matters. And I will never support somebody who thinks that we should be writing off rural or blue collar voters. In the Iowa State Senate, I've been a champion for expanding access to rural health care, to expanding access to maternal health care, and I cannot wait to take that fight to the United States Senate alongside Senator Warren.
So you talked a lot about needing to, oh, sorry.
No, just making sure that we're,
Okay.
we didn't miss anything. We've got Laura right here.
Okay.
We'll go there first, then we'll come right to
Okay.
you. You're good.
Senator Warren, I understand how a reconciliation bill could reverse the Medicaid cuts and the food assistance cuts, but what I'm not getting is how, if the Democrats take control of the House and Senate next year, how do you get President Trump to sign that kind of reconciliation bill?
Because he needs to keep government open. And we will have very different leverage now in all of the budget negotiations. remember, we gotta keep government going. And what we're fighting for is just a government that says the guys at the top have gotta pay their fair share, and we've got to keep the funding in healthcare. We gotta keep our rural hospitals open. We gotta keep our nurses on the job. We gotta keep our clinics open. We've gotta keep people with access to healthcare. And this is what I love about what Zach is doing. And we can do better. We can do all of that through the budget process. So long as Donald Trump has a Republican Senate and a Republican House that simply bow down, then we've seen what happens. And that is the biggest corporations in this country get huge tax breaks. They're paying nothing, some of them. And yet regular folks are losing their access to health care. We can reverse that. We will have the leverage, but it starts with 51 votes in the Senate, and that road runs right through Iowa. The whole nation looks to Iowa right now and says, which way are you gonna go? More of the same? We've seen where that leads. They've already passed the law showing us the cuts are coming in 2027. This is not, we imagine them. They are literally written into the law right now. This is our one chance to reverse that, and it happens through Iowa. I'm here because I believe in Zach Wahls, and I believe Zach Wahls is the person who can win the Senate race in Iowa.
All right.
Okay, so
Yep.
as you just said, you believe he's the candidate who can win in Iowa. Part of what I've been talking with undecided voters here, even in the debate it got discussed last week about electability. And that was something that was a nonstop topic of conversation in your own race in 2020. I wonder if you can talk about what you think maybe is misunderstood or not. Like, what do people get wrong about this electability conversation?
So let me take it in a slightly different direction. The way I think about this, listen to Zach's stories. Zach and I met basically in a trailer park over a kitchen table while Candy and her neighbors talked about how private equity had come in, bought up the land underneath, and raised their rent 67%. And that activated Zach. It was not because it was a smart move going up against private equity, not a way to get a lot of outside funding, not a way that's guaranteed to win. But he moved into that fight, and he got his colleagues together, Republicans and Democrats, got a bill through the state Senate as a freshman senator, wow, and then watched it snatched away by pure corruption. Someone who took a big fat campaign contribution and then killed off a bill that would have helped hundreds, thousands of struggling people here in Iowa. And that person is the Republican nominee. Zach is the one who can tell that story up close and personal. He's the one who can show the people of Iowa not only that he can talk a good talk, but that he has actually been out there and done the work and made the change. And it seems to me all across America, what people are looking for are people not just who have good ideas, but people who really will wade into the fight and who understand that, yeah, we have to take on some hard fights. We have to take on some fights that we may not win, but we take on the fights against the corruption, against the powerful, against the insiders. And we go into those battles saying, nobody owns me except the people that I am here to represent. To me, that's the end of the electability question. It's who are you really gonna fight for? And when the people of Iowa see who Zach fights for, I think that's the guy they want.
Do you think Representative Turk is somebody who's backed by Senator Schumer, or at least tacitly is not in as best position to do that?
I'm here because I have known Zach since 2019. I have followed him through his first fight, and then his second, and then his third. I watch him as a fighter. And I watch the fact that even when you sometimes get knocked down, that he's right back up and right back into the fight. mad respect.
If I can just one last point on this. I represented Cedar and a slice of Muscatine County. These are counties that voted for Donald Trump in 2016, and then I won in 2018. I have talked to literally hundreds of Obama, Trump, Wahls voters. And when you talk to these voters and you ask, you know, why are you voting for who you're voting for? What I hear from these folks is, look, I don't agree with Donald Trump on every issue, and I don't agree with you on every issue. But you care about my community. You understand the challenges that we are facing in communities like mine. You put forward ideas about how to make those problems, address those problems. And in the state Senate, I have demonstrated, Senator Warren just laid out, the courage to fight those battles, not to back down. And those voters are frustrated with leaders in both parties. And I think it is going to be a hell of a lot easier to defeat Representative Hinson in November. And I cannot tell you how excited I am to tell that story on the debate stage with Representative Hinson, with someone who can look voters in the eye and tell them, I have shown a courage and a willingness, and we're doing it in this campaign, to take on leaders in both parties, because I'm not running for the United States Senate to work for Chuck Schumer or Donald Trump or Elon Musk or the private equity corporations or anybody else. I am running because Iowans deserve a senator who works and who fights for us.
Great, thank you, everybody.
Good.
Thanks.
Thank you.